So Keith, you can see my screen all right?
It's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. So hello, everybody, and welcome to our Health Investor Summit. This is a part of our Health Impact Investment Challenge ongoing. Really looking forward to having everybody join us today. As we kick off this event, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that though we're gathered virtually, for many of us, it's on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Stolo, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. As we know, we have an international audience today. We'd like to extend this acknowledgement to all of those who historically stewarded and nurtured the lands that you are tuning in from, making it possible for us to live, work, and play on them today. Just to give you a quick overview of what to expect from today's summit, we'll start with a few welcomes, hearing from both Keith and Blair from Spring and the Telus Pollinator Fund. Then we'll jump right into our investor panel, moderated by Keith, and then we'll go to our Telus Pollinator Entrepreneur panel, moderated by Blair. After that, I'll give kind of a deep dive into our program overview of the Health Impact Investor Challenge that we're currently looking for both entrepreneurs and investors for. And then we have some open networking at the end. With that being said, I'll hand it over to Keith.
Amazing. Thanks, Kristen, and fantastic to have everybody here today. I'll give you a quick overview and then I'll hand it over to Blair, who's going to talk about Pollinator Fund. Welcome to this event put on by Spring Activator and Pollinator Fund for Good. Spring is an organization who is focused on our mission of changing the world through innovation, and proud to call ourselves a certified B Corp as well as a member of 1% for the Planet. So for us, that means working equal parts with investors and entrepreneurs to catalyze early stage capital growth and impact. Now, if we move on to the next slide, we have had the good fortune of working globally in the work that we've done, and we bring a lot of that into the work that we do with impact investors and with impact entrepreneurs. So now more than 55 communities around the world, including across Canada, Europe, Latin America, South and Southeast Asia. So really excited to bring that kind of global perspective to the work that we do. We've been busy bees. Last week was our 8th anniversary officially, and in 8 years we have supported more than 2,000 entrepreneurs, and we have also trained more than 100 impact investors to date. This year is going to be an exciting year for us with 6 impact investor challenges, adding another 100+ investors to that list. And we have an investor community of over 300. And so really excited to kind of bring this collective experience to the table. This is the fantastic Spring team. We have people that are based on Vancouver Island, in Vancouver, Toronto, San Francisco, and we have our first part-time person in Singapore as well. And so really excited to have you engage with this team over the course of the Impact Investor Challenge, whether you are coming in as an entrepreneur or as an investor or in one of the other programs that we have. So really excited to have you meet some of us today, and I'm sure many of us going forward. Fantastic. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Blair, who is leading the Telus Pollinator Fund for Good, and he's going to tell you all about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith, and thanks, Kristen, for kicking us off. Keith, it's unfortunate because you stole my thunder, my first line. The busy bees. We do like our puns at the Pollinator Fund. So just thanks so much, folks, for this incredible opportunity to gather here today and connect around impact investing. And Keith and team, thanks for all the fantastic work that you folks do at Spring to forward opportunities in the impact sector from the side of the innovators and the side of the investors. So just greatly appreciate this opportunity. Kristen, can we pop over to the next slide? So about the Telus Pollinator Fund, where I won't drain the slides, and I'll do this quickly as I know we have some fantastic panelists that we look forward to having discussions with today and uncovering and sharing learnings. But the Telus Pollinator Fund, so at $100 million, the Pollinator Fund is one of the world's largest corporate impact funds. And it's a fantastic reflection of an ongoing commitment from Telus around social innovation and putting our capital to work to better outcomes in the communities that we live, work, and serve in. So let's talk a little bit about the objectives of the fund and what we're seeking to do. So first and foremost, we're here to support game-changing and far-reaching social, health, and environmental solutions. We're looking to generate meaningful benefits through our investments to better the planet in those communities and people that are in the greatest need. We're also looking to enhance the positive impact of our portfolio companies, obviously through the direct investments of the Pollinator Fund, but also through the deep networks, longstanding experience and technology and applications developed by at Telus over many, many years throughout Canada and now globally through our health team, our agriculture team, and of course, our Telus International team. And another key and important reason that we launched the Telus Pollinator Fund for Good and a driving force behind our CEO's vision was to advance the state of the impact investing ecosystem in Canada and to help encourage other corporates to get into the impact investing space. So we're excited to be one of the largest in Canada and again, one of the largest globally, and very excited to help and share insights and share learnings and learn from others as they consider or are embarking on initiatives akin to this on their own. And then finally, supporting or wrapping all this together is delivering financial returns, because we believe in investing in for-profit businesses, and we also believe in generating positive financial outcomes from the Pollinator investments. Allows us to return more capital and invest in more sustainable and positive impact-oriented businesses and find and support more mission-driven founders. Thanks, Kristen. We're on the next slide. So the areas of investment for the Pollinator Fund, kind of going left to right, supporting responsible agriculture, caring for our planet, transforming healthcare, and enabling more inclusive communities. So we kind of think of this as 4 pillars, but 2 whats, and those would be agriculture and healthcare, and 2 hows, by doing it in a sustainable, environmentally friendly fashion. And finally, the other how, and critically important, is building or connecting and addressing systemic issues with respect to opportunity and systemic issues with respect to access to capital. So building more inclusive communities. Next slide, please, Kristen. So talking a bit about our investment criteria and what we look for. So generally speaking, we're on the earlier stage. So we're seed to Series A. We do look for early traction. So some demonstration of proven product market fit, validated by revenue generation. We want founders and companies with exceptional and diverse leadership teams. In our first year of operation, we have 40% of our founders were female, and fully 50% of our portfolio is led by Indigenous and racialized founders. So an extremely key commitment for the Pollinator Fund. Our investments will vary depending on the stage of the company, its growth needs and alignment to our strategy. But typically speaking, we're in the $500,000 to $2 million range on first checks. And the portfolio does have significant room carved out for follow-on. And I can't underscore this enough. We're going to talk about it today. You'll see it definitely come out when we go into the Entrepreneur Showcase, and we have the opportunity to talk to Managing Life and Pocket Naloxone. But impact has to be deeply embedded within the mindset, the DNA, the culture of the founder, the founding team and the mission of the business. That's so key to us, that impact is not a bolt-on, but it's a core criteria that permeates every aspect of the analysis and the investigation that we do, and is an absolutely key criteria driving who we invest in and how we support those companies. And finally, talking a little bit about the portfolio. So next slide, please. Again, busy bees. So we've been in operation just over a year. We've got 11 investments that we've announced to date, and almost $20 million committed and invested in these mission-driven businesses that are changing our world for the better. I think anytime that we have the opportunity to announce new companies and or provide updates, the website's obviously a fantastic place to check us out. So we've got those details later on in the presentation, but you can always follow us at telus.com/Pollinator Fund. And we look forward to growing this portfolio and finding compelling new founders and impact-oriented businesses through the networks that we establish here and in partnership with folks like Spring. So Keith, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Blair, and really appreciate not only what you shared, but also I think, providing a type of leadership in the impact investing community that is not often seen, especially at the corporate level. And so I think for all of us on this call, it's a really exciting time to have Pollinator Fund digging in. And this leads me to this next component, which is the Health Impact Investor Challenge. So for everybody, if you don't know what the Impact Investor Challenge is, it is an 11-week program that helps a group of up to 20 investors to either make their first or one of their first early stage impact investments. What we do is we select 20 high potential impact-oriented businesses, in this case, in health innovation. And over the course of 11 weeks, we work with the investors to help them take the 20, select the top 10, then to the top 5, spend about 6 weeks in due diligence or the homework that the investors will do to make an investment decision. And all of that culminates at the end with at least one company receiving an investment of $100,000 or more. And so for us, it's a really exciting time. It's especially exciting because the Telus Pollinator Fund team will be walking alongside the program throughout. And so a fantastic opportunity for investors to meet with and get to know one of the great funding partners here in North America, but also an opportunity for the companies to get to know the fund and vice versa. So for us, I think it's a really exciting time. Program is kicking off in March. And so the entrepreneur deadline is actually, if I'm not mistaken, the end of this week. And the application deadline for investors is the end of Feb. So I think I've covered everything off, but Kristen will correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm going to pause here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, both Keith and Blair. Great introductions here. We will be going into a little bit of a deeper dive about the program after our panels today, but let's jump right into our investor panel. So I'll hand it over to you, Keith, to give a few introductions, and if we can get our investors spotlighted, that would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. So while the spotlight process is underway, and I think, I'm personally really excited about this conversation for me because it's actually an opportunity to meet a couple of new people to me, but also somebody that I've known for a few years now. And so on the panel, we have the following: Genevieve Le Marchal, Donna Parr, and Julian Pham. And it's a nice bit of a crisscross across the continent. But I'm going to allow each one of them to introduce themselves in turn. And Genevieve, I'm going to start with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith. I actually met Keith a long time ago, and I even drove up to Vancouver, BC to get a little sense of what the startup scene was like up there. And that was like over 10 years ago, I think. So
we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Anyway, so I am based down here in Southern California. I am the head of healthcare ventures for Expert Dojo and the managing partner of Suncoast Ventures. Expert Dojo is actually a growth accelerator program. and we have a healthcare focused and specific cohort. Our program is very, very different than other accelerators. Basically, it's the only similarity is that it's called an accelerator, and that's basically where it ends. One of the things I will just note kind of across the board is we began investing in 2019 over at Expert Dojo. We measure our performance on internal rate of return. Expert Dojo as a fund has an 173% internal rate of return, which is orders of magnitude higher than the average seed stage venture fund, and a 300% portfolio increase over the last 12 months, and a 65% follow-on funding rate for all of our companies. Why this matters so much is because it's 41% female founders, a large majority of them underrepresented, and we're funding companies from all over the globe. I've done companies in Africa, I've done companies in Europe, Latin America, Mexico, Asia, India. We're extremely active. We've done 150 investments so far. So what that means for potential companies that are interested in taking larger shares of the market is once you've sort of completed those initial proof of concept and you found product market fit and you have some initial traction, we are the stick part of the hockey stick, but we always have an eye towards impact. We're very interested in how do we help the entrepreneur who's maybe not that Silicon Valley DNA, that person who seems like right out of the box, they're going to have success. We work with a lot of the underrepresented and we have great success with them. So I'm really excited to be here, and I can share more about Expert Dojo, or you guys can go to our website. Subsequently, Suncoast Ventures is a seed, I would say late seed, to Series A fund that's part of a larger healthcare venture capital ecosystem. So we are also a female-led fund and investing in, I would say, predominantly female-led portfolio. And that is, we also have a major eye towards impact, and we're follow-on investing with the companies from our Expert Dojo portfolio who are really breaking out and having big success. So
amazing. Thank you for that introduction. I'd love to turn it over to Donna, who's going to introduce herself and Cross Border Impact Ventures.
Hi. So I am a managing partner at Cross Border Impact Ventures. We are a new fund. We had a first close in December. We were incubated by Grand Challenges Canada, which Grand Challenges has a network of investees. It's done mostly grants and loans. It's been funded by the Canadian government. And we use this network, and why it's important to us is we are investing in healthcare companies that are focused on women, children, and adolescent health. But we're a dual market fund. We're looking for companies that are primarily in high income markets, North America, Europe, Israel, but every company has to have applicability in lower and middle income countries. And we're trying to get the tech transfer earlier than the usual decade to 2 decades that it lags getting to lower and middle income countries. And we're very excited by new technologies that are based on digital health, medical diagnostic devices, because they do have the ability to lower costs, and not just in lower and middle income countries, but in high income markets that can reach a lot of populations that are not being reached as well. So we are an impact investor. We're looking for market rates of return. And then we use GCC's contacts for doing due diligence in lower and middle income countries. It's operated in 100 countries. So we have great implementation partners that are on the ground that can help our companies expand. And we have a lot of access to concessionary funding so that these companies can continue doing what they're doing and make sure that they expand in the markets that they're in, but that there's also funding to help them expand elsewhere as well and get that proof of concept in other countries. And we're a small team. We're 4 people right now. We are focused on gender and ethnic diversity in terms of the product, and teams are helping companies get their own products and teams, because we believe fundamentally it leads to better companies and more sustainable products as well.
Yeah, and Donna, I love the fact that you're thinking about a quite holistic and richer approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion around that. And so that's a fantastic share. Thank you for that. Julian, I'd love to hand it over to you to have you tell everybody about Third Culture Capital.
Hi, thanks for having me, Keith and the team. So we are a Boston-based seed stage fund, also new. We came into existence in late 2020. So broadly speaking, we're trying to, our general mission is to build bridges across cultures and across disciplines to really create impact in the world. So our core focus is healthcare. Our mission is to invest at the intersection of care delivery and culture. The name of the fund, Third Culture Capital, is kind of a reflection of what third culture kids are. So third culture kids are children who grew up in a culture that's different from their parents' culture, and neither feel a fit in that culture or their parents' culture. They're really part of a third universal culture. And it's a little bit of my own story. I was born in Vietnam. I grew up in Paris. I came to the US as a teenager. And it's not a unique story. We think that individuals who've had such unique life experiences, whether it's because of the geography or the languages or cultures they are, or because of the disciplines that they bring into healthcare, just are more adaptable, more resilient, and have a very unique creative edge on innovation. And so we invest at the seed stage in founders who don't fit the mold. We're global by design, even though we are in Boston and can tap into the rich ecosystem there. We've made 3 investments in the last year. Just to give you some numbers, we reviewed 415 companies from 26 countries on 6 continents, invested in 3 companies, East Coast, and one that's French-US company. So I'm excited to be here and talk about our views on impact and healthcare.
Fantastic. Thanks for the introduction, Julian, and to all of you. I'm really excited to dig in. And so without further ado, we're going to start to dive in with some questions. For everybody, you might notice that there's a red number 1 at the bottom of your screen, and that is we have our first question in Q&A. You can put the question into Q&A, or you can just throw it into chat. Team here will be moderating those questions, and we'll be digging into them. I'm just going to help everybody kind of whet their appetite with a couple of starter questions, and then we're going to dive in. So starting off, the question that I will have for the panel is, how do you think about impact in healthcare? And what does it mean for you for a company to be an impact company in healthcare versus not an impact company? And is there such a thing as a healthcare company that's not an impact company? I think that's a question a lot of people ask. So I'm going to go random, and I'm going to start with Donna on this question. So how do you think about impact in healthcare, and what does it mean for you for a company to either be impact or not in healthcare?
I think there's a big difference. I've been involved in investing for at least 25 years in venture capital and private equity, and a lot in the healthcare space. And a lot of companies, venture capital companies, focus on where, first of all, the US market. Everybody wants to be in the US market because that's where they can get the highest returns. And there's not a lot of focus on getting beyond the US market, and there's not a lot of focus for getting below to a broader tier of users. It's a lot on where can you get a high price, and where can you get a high price, and where can you get a reimbursement. And so that already cuts out a lot of people if you're looking for just insurance companies for reimbursement. And I think impact makes you think more holistically about where does the benefit come from. We're a fund that is impact, and that's very important to our investors. We have, first of all, a structured fund where we've got a guarantee from the Swedish government. We've got investment from the German government that is at a lower return to incent more people into our fund. And so we have to measure impact very carefully. We get right down to where lives saved, lives improved in lower and middle income countries. We have Excel spreadsheets that map it out on a very complex basis. And then we have to sign global access commitments with our companies that are flexible to the point that we take into account what happens in business and expansion. But we want people to be committed. We want the other shareholders to sign on that they're committed to these targets for expansion into lower and middle income countries. And so we work a lot to help our companies be able to expand, and they have to agree that they want to do it and be part of it and discuss it on an annual basis to make them strive towards real broader impact.
Well shared. Julian, curious of your perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, I very much agree with what Donna has said. That my views as a clinician is that impact needs to be measured, right? And we know that healthcare is very local. So when you start thinking about care delivery in different regions across the world, you have to have this notion of cultural competency and be able to deliver care in that location with the resources and the kind of philosophies that exist there. Measuring impact is very difficult for us. We use this framework of it's called the Quadruple Aim. And so for us, thinking about impact in care delivery means, does this solution improve outcomes for patients? Does it reduce the cost of care delivery for the system? Does it improve the experience of care for patients? And does it improve the experience of care for providers? Now, if a company, no matter what the modality is, if it's a life sciences company or a digital health or a device company, fits 2, 3, and hopefully 4 of these quadrants, this is something that we think meets our criteria of impact.
Well shared. And one thing I just want to highlight to everybody is at Spring, over the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months, we have seen a dramatic increase in investors trying to figure out the best and most efficient ways to do impact measurement. And Julian, you shared one of the approaches that is available and how you're applying it. And so this is an area that I think as health investors, it's a really important part of this process, is to know that this is an active topic of conversation. There is no universal best practice on how to do it. I think everybody's figuring out the right approach, but I think it is becoming more and more a part of the common, discussion as impact investing becomes more mainstream. And so I just want to highlight that. Genevieve, would love to get your perspective on impact in healthcare.
I think sometimes we're starting to pipeline early, and so sometimes you have to be a little bit looser on the impact, because you have to look at some of the impact potential, because you don't necessarily have the proof in the pudding yet. So I would piggyback on with Julian about what he said for those being very key, because it can't actually get any traction in the market, in my opinion, without those items. There's a big difference between impact versus revenue, and impact versus valuation multiples on exits and all of that stuff. And they're not always, of course, same. But one of the things that I like to look for is, I'm looking for a company too that has the potential to create a bridge to pave a way for some sort of broken systemic thing that needs to be fixed. And so, you can't necessarily go in and tear up an entire sidewalk, but is this an important component of massive change that needs to occur in a certain area? And so if that is occurring, that for me is impact, in addition to patient life saved and, clinicians' workflows and processes improved and things like that. Generally, when I'm looking for companies, and if I'm going to get excited about a company, it actually has to check multiple boxes for impact. It can't just be like, this is going to do this or this is going to do that. I'm looking for several boxes to be checked, in addition to the fact that the market is very, very large and it's a venture fundable company and it can scale into other verticals and economies and stuff like that. So trying to create impact is like no easy feat, really.
Absolutely. And one thing that I would say, and curious if anybody wants to talk about this, always find, because Genevieve, you're speaking about this, there's the point in time impact measurement, and then there's the slope of the line, right? The trends, the learning, the adaptation.
That's a good way to put it.
That over the last couple of years in particular, I find that impact investors are, I won't say more easily, but are embracing more the notion of the slope of the line and seeing where a company can go, and then, you know, kind of interfacing with that team to find out where they want to go on that line, and then how they're going to get there. And so I'm just curious if anybody wants to jump in and kind of speak to that notion of like moment in time impact measurement versus over time slope of the line impact measurement. And maybe I'll throw it to Julian first this time.
I think that's a tough question. I think if I understand what you're saying, right, is you know, when we look at companies that are, say, at an early stage and what they said their goals are, how does impact look like in early stage versus, you know, what they're trying to achieve? Is that kind of the question you're asking? Yeah, as you know, the criteria for investment in early stage companies, say pre-seed or seed, are, first of all, very different if you're looking at a life sciences company versus a digital health, like tech enabled company. It's very different if you're looking, in a company in the US versus another region. And you only can rely on a few things, right? It's a little bit too early. So, you have, as a fund, you have to have certain conviction about, the size of the market, whether this is even VC backable and it has potential for growth, and what that growth looks like. Whether you think of it from financial terms, or whether you think of it from scale, whether you think of it from impact, and whichever way you measure impact. And then, you have to look at the team and the products. For us, we are very deliberate in how we select the teams and the people that we want to invest in, right? We invest in people more so than in products. And hence the name of our fund, Third Culture Capital. We are investing in individuals who are bridging different regions or different industries. And we think that by doing so, they have an opportunity for impact that is much broader and much more scaled. In other words, you kind of get two for the price of one, right? Someone who is a dual citizen who is building a company in the US, but is originally from India, for example, that in the back of their head, they're thinking about how does my product, how can I make my product successful in the US? But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, can this work in India? Which is kind of what Donna is saying. And so we're looking for that, kind of, bimodal or kind of multi-dimensional way of creating impact. But again, I think my answer really is early stage impact looks and feels very different from what it can become down the road. And it's really up to the VCs to assist and help these entrepreneurs realize their vision as they scale and grow.
Yeah, well shared. Donna, I'd love your perspective as well.
Well, we're investing at the commercial stage. So we're a Series A investor for digital health, and more a Series B for diagnostics and medical device, where they already have one regulatory approval like FDA or CE mark in one product. And so we're taking a longer term view of where the impact is. And a lot of times the companies we're dealing with may have done one thing in one lower and middle income country, but they're really focused in Europe or the US or Canada. And so it is a long game that we're looking for. And we're spending a lot of time assessing the capability of expanding into India or in sub-Saharan Africa or in other countries in the global South. And so we look at it as what's possible over time, not where they are today. And we'll even invest in looking at how to take costs out and help find funders to take costs out to make sure that they will get adopted. For example, we had contraceptive we're still quite interested in, but for it to be applicable, costs have to come out. And so we will look to find ways to do that. So we're in the longer game for impact. We don't see where it is today, but where it can be.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Genevieve, do you have a comment? And then I'm going to dive into some audience questions.
Yeah, I actually do. One of the, I think of two companies, but one in particular is a therapy for dog cancer. And so it's using a targeted nanobody. It's using nanobodies, so a targeted immunotherapy. And one of the things in the short term is, one, it's curing dog cancer. Everyone loves to cure dog cancer. Everyone wants to do that. But and the alternative is biohazard chemotherapies that are actually designed for humans. The impact in the short term as well is that it allows general veterinary to administer the drug, so they don't have to go to a canine oncologist. So it opens up the potential for more people to be able to offer this treatment to dogs that has a lot of barriers, cost wise, just being one. But one of the things that's very interesting about this is it's opening up some potential in terms of bringing, this is just the beginning of what is the potential for nanobodies. As a segment of targeted immunotherapy, there are definitely applications in humans for sure. We can make some short-term impact with dogs, but we have some long-term impacts that can obviously be made over the next couple of decades, probably, in terms of driving this forward to help with cancer in humans. And additionally, they're pioneering a very interesting manufacturing methodology that utilizes yeast. And I can't explain a whole lot about it because I don't actually fully understand it, but it's something that I think can be adopted much more broadly to help bring therapies and treatments to market faster. So as we're starting to see the drug development pipeline explode, we're seeing so much more AI and data analytics applied to that drug development pipeline in order to expedite that. I see this as a potential for also manufacturing efficiencies that can have a big impact in the future and can help a lot of different segments, not just our dog drug. So that's just kind of one example of the types of sort of the way we think about it. There's the short-term stuff, which is great, but if I can open the door for more opportunity in the future, that might be 10 or 20 years out for all I know, but we do have to check the boxes for the impact and the financial returns in the short term as well.
Great. Thank you very much for that. As each one of you were answering the question, all of you talked about global perspective. And so one of the questions that's been raised from the audience is from Alex. And Alex asked the question of how much do you invest globally? So outside of Canada or the US? Do you collaborate closely with any international like ESOs or ecosystem partners to help support those ventures? And do you require that they register in Canada or the US? So I'll start with Genevieve on this one, and then we'll go to Donna.
Yeah, I think the nature of that question is kind of coming from the impetus of saying, we believe that every company, it can be applied a formula. Here's your menu of options. Choose your menu. We're going to run you through a process like a boot camp, and you're going to come out the other end. And that's really not how we work. Every single company that we work with has their own strategy, has their own needs. They change all the time, sometimes weekly. And we make introductions, and sometimes even at the end of the day, we're growth hackers. That is who we are at our core. And sometimes if we have to growth hack our way into something, we'll do that. So it's not necessarily about saying, this company is sitting here waiting to meet with all of our startups, whether it's a fit or not. It's about saying, we know the people, we have, what we call a bench and networks into hundreds of potential market access points. And we're going to help you start to forge your way in. The thing about registering, yes, our safe notes and things like that, we would like you to convert to a corporation on on conversion. And we often usually would prefer it if you would set up a subsidiary in the US. It's not a total deal breaker, but if you want to raise, the United States is one of the main epicenters and hubs in the world for venture capital. And if you are going to raise subsequent rounds of venture capital and that they're going to be large, it will benefit you to have a subsidiary in the US most of the time. That's not always the case, but most of the time it's going to make your life easier if you do. So if it's not going to hurt the company, and if it makes sense, we usually want that, but that doesn't bar us from getting involved today. So,
Great.
yeah.
Great. Now, Donna, on this question of international and partnering with international ESOs or support organizations, you had mentioned in your early kind of introduction as an organization about implementation partners, wondering if that ties in. So would love your perspective on it.
Yeah, well, we believe that, well, first of all, we have to invest 75% of our fund in high income markets. And the reason for that is this dual market strategy, we believe, makes our company more sustainable. It leads to broader exits and easier funding. But the more important part is we want to make sure that when the buyer buys the company, the economics are there for them to continue with what is happening in lower and middle income countries. We want to make sure that if we are successful in helping our companies expand, that continues on once we're no longer a shareholder. We believe in local implementation partners, both for the knowledge, but it's also they understand the market, and you really do need to have local parties to understand the market. Grand Challenges Canada has done 1,300 investments in 100 countries. And so it's mostly grants and debt, but they have partnered with a number of very solid groups that are on the ground, that really understand the markets and can help us get people to work, to partner. A lot of times you need local partners. So really important to make sure that, and local investors as well. We can do 25% of our investments in other countries, and local partners are key, who are there, understand the lay of the land, and can bring in good people. Agree wholeheartedly with Julian that it's always an investment in people.
Well shared, well shared. Julian, your perspective on global and partners.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. It's a team effort. It's very hard to come from an idea to a successful company at scale. So yes, if you have, as a matter of kind of practicality, if you have, operational partners in the ecosystems abroad, yes, let's partner with them and tap into those resources. The only thing I would add, and I would agree with what Donna and Genevieve have said, the only thing I would add to this is, thinking about how companies are moving to the US. As an early stage fund and as a small fund, we are also investment professionals, right? So we have to think about how do we get return capital to our LPs while supporting these entrepreneurs to be successful. So there's a great opportunity for valuation arbitrage sometimes from companies that are in other ecosystems who are coming to the US and even different regions of the US. So if they see an advantage, of course, you don't want to force them to come here, but if they see an advantage to attacking the US market or North American market, absolutely, let's support them and help them when they come here. And as an investor, take advantage of a valuation arbitrage when we invest in them abroad.
Yeah, well shared. Thank you. I'm actually going to put a question right back to you. And the question is, do you classify companies that design consumer products that are health proactive as healthcare? And then here, the supplemental question is specifically if they have proprietary tech that can be leveraged to provide clean water in low-income countries and regions. So it's kind of, this one sounds a bit like a hybrid between health tech and clean tech. But Julian, would love your perspective on first the consumer products that are health proactive, and then second, this kind of hybrid.
I'm a physician by training, right? And when I started medicine, care delivery was very paternalistic. And there's still some regions around the world where care delivery is very paternalistic. It's whatever the physician says you do. Fortunately, we've evolved to a point where we are recognizing that the most kind of underutilized stakeholder in care delivery is the patient. So over the past few years, we've seen consumerization of healthcare. And whereas 5-10 years ago, I would say that no, wellness does not count as healthcare. Now, absolutely. I think as technology is penetrating all facets of care delivery, I think that patients deserve to have more control and more insight into their care. The healthcare consumer will be a very powerful stakeholder in the future. So we do think of it. We do think of healthcare consumers as patients as well. It's just whether there's some true impact and positive outcomes for these patients or consumers down the road using that service or that technology or that new business model.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's great. Now, Genevieve, Expert Dojo, knowing some of the history and DNA of that organization, I'm anticipating you're seeing or have historically seen a fair amount of consumer-centric, health proactive. What's kind of the current state from your perspective?
It's hard. Like, okay, so immediately as soon as someone said health proactive, consumer centric, I immediately, not knowing what the product is, all day, every day, I see like meditation apps that are supposed to help people with their mindset. And I know meditation does help with mindset. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I see it all day, every day, all day, every day. So it's becoming more of like a wellness thing. So I'm not saying that it's not like, I don't really classify like a consumer yoga app as healthcare. So if that were to come in, first of all, it'd have to have a lot of traction and have some sort of differentiator, but I wouldn't put it in a healthcare cohort. I would put it into the regular cohort probably. So I think I would need to understand more about what that is. I would say if it has other applications, I would then take a different approach and I'd start looking at the intellectual property. And then that's kind of a rabbit hole, but what's the core of what this really is? But my immediate thought is it sounds like anything that doesn't sound like it has any sort of clinical sort of validation or anything for like a treatment, if it's like a preventative or if it's just a wellness thing, that would probably go into the general cohort, I would say. Did I answer the question properly, Keith?
You know what? I think you did a great job, because underlying what you shared, and I just put it in the chat, is there's a part of what you were just sharing, which is investment thesis, right? Like, what do you invest in? What do you not? As a part of that, you were saying, hey, there's like a subset here that's probably not a part of our portfolio. And I think it's really important for investors to have the clarity where it's possible. And then of course, for the entrepreneur to also engage that and find fit. Donna, what's your perspective on that consumer side, kind of health proactive?
Well, we also are looking for evidence-based, but I see consumer as sometimes a market niche. And there's a lot more direct to consumer that's allowing companies to get going. So for example, we were looking at a preterm birth monitor. So it was a monitor that right now is a consumer product for women who are pregnant as a way to just monitor their pregnancy, but they're in clinical trials to also see if it can be something that can be used for preterm birth, for noticing that someone is actually going in to labor. In the US, it's a question of getting the right care, getting to the hospital, all that. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's saving a woman's life, because often she'll stay where she is until all of a sudden she has to get to the hospital and she's not close, and it's saving a life. So it's starting as a consumer product as a way to get into market, but there's other applications that will have clinical validation that are large markets and very needed. We're looking at something else that's starting with a lot of clinical trials. Sorry, I have a cat that's trying to get in here. Starting with clinical trials, but they see themselves as potentially consumer product down the road. So I see it as a niche market that you have to figure out where you are in the niche, but we're interested in the clinical validation that solves a real healthcare issue. But if it helps a company get revenues and doesn't take away from focus, it can be a good add-on as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for that share. Everybody, I feel like we're just starting to warm up and already we are at time. And so this has been a fantastic conversation. For the panel, first and foremost, Donna and Genevieve and Julian, thank you so much for taking the time to come to our summit today and to engage on this conversation. Obviously, all three are welcome to stay as long as you're able. And I'll just point to the three of you that Moji asked one question in the chat that you could probably pop an answer to if it's relevant for you. So once again, thank you so much. Absolutely amazing and great to be able to share this impact investing journey with you. And with that, I would love to hand it back to Kristen, who's going to take us to the next part of the agenda.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith, and to our three panelists as well. It was really great having you all join us. As Keith said, there are quite a few questions in that Q&A little chat box. If you go to the bottom of your Zoom screen for our investor panel, if you have a few minutes just to quickly type out some answers to any questions we didn't get to, that'd be much appreciated. And now that we've heard from the investor perspective, we're really looking forward to invite Blair back to the stage, as well as two entrepreneurs in the healthcare sector that are Telus Pollinator fund portfolio companies. So that being said, as everybody's coming up onto the stage here, I'll pass it over to Blair. Thank you.
Hey, thanks again, Kristen. And thanks for that discussion, Keith and team, some great insights and a couple of comments that I think will really resonate with our founders here. So without further ado and a bit of repetition in case anyone joined lately, hey folks, I'm Blair Miller, managing partner of the Telus Pollinator Fund for Good. And joining me today, I've got two incredible founders of mission-driven organizations that we're thrilled to have invested in and have as part of our portfolio and are joining us today. So welcome to both of you. We've got Thayer Jan Mohammed, who's the founder and CEO of Managing Life, and Ashanti Mata, who's the founder and CEO of Pocket Naloxone. Both of these great healthcare organizations are portfolio companies, Telus Pollinator, where we're driving to ensure equitable access to healthcare and finding innovative new solutions to systemic issues facing Canadians today, Canadians and beyond, I should say. As the COVID-19 global pandemic has accelerated the demand in use of digital health solutions, we see increasing pressure across the board on our health systems, on our healthcare workers, frontline and supporting. And the Pollinator Fund believes in investing in companies like Pocket Naloxone and Managing Life that focus on developing innovative new ways to address some of these key challenges that are facing our citizens today, that also provide opportunities to reach the most vulnerable populations through their solutions and create better healthcare experiences and overall enabling better healthcare outcomes. And it just harkens me back to Julian's comment and a question or a comment about patient engagement in insight in their own care delivery. And I'm sure that Thayer was nodding along and took that comment with keen interest. Certainly we at the Pollinator Fund did. And so maybe with that comment and intro, I'll start with Thayer and get him to provide a bit of an overview about Managing Life, just a quick one, traction, and maybe a comment about, build on Julian's comment about customer insight and participation in their own health outcomes.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to Telus and Spring for having me join today. And I'm really glad to be part of this panel with the rest of the panelists. So yeah, thanks for inviting me. So as Blair mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Managing Life. We're a digital health company based out of Toronto that's entirely focused on helping people manage chronic pain. So chronic pain is pain that lasts longer than 3 months. It's your back pain, your neck pain, your arthritis, your fibromyalgia, your headaches. It crosses thousands of different conditions, and it affects about 20% of the population. But it also has a massive cost, both individually to those who sometimes get debilitated by that and lose income and have to take time off work, but also to the larger healthcare system. On average, someone with chronic pain costs 50% more than someone without. And it's actually one of the biggest drivers of medical expenses when it comes to chronic conditions, more than cancer, more than diabetes, more than heart disease, largely because it's so prevalent. And so there are some unique challenges for people with chronic pain. Access to care is probably the biggest one. There was a study coming out by the Canadian Pain Task Force that highlighted that the best way to approach pain management was through something called the multidisciplinary pain clinic, where it was a combination of different types of disciplines that prescribed medication, offered physiotherapy, psychology, patient self-management. It was truly multidisciplinary. But there's only one of these for every 300,000 Canadians, and many provinces don't even have any. Sometimes there's a wait list of up to 14 months. And so it isn't the sustainable solution. So at Managing Life, what we're trying to do is build a solution that allows people to learn more about their condition and self-manage their condition by teaching them coping strategies. But more importantly, by engaging people in their own healthcare for chronic pain, we can also then facilitate improved communication with those that do provide healthcare, whether it's their primary care physician, their physiotherapist, or an anesthesiologist or a rheumatologist. And then finally, the last thing that we do is with consent, we can share that information remotely to anyone in the circle of care via our web-based portal. And what we have found is that it's not just pain clinics that we can share that information with. We also can share that information with insurers, with disability carriers, for example. And built into that remote monitoring portal are advanced analytics that flag at-risk behaviors weeks, sometimes months sooner than ever possible before. So a little bit of traction about what we've done. We are the top ranked, most downloaded chronic pain app on the market. We've helped over 65,000 people globally from 130 different countries. It can be used in one of 7 different languages where people can enter information in their language of choice, and we translate that information into English. We've partnered with 10 different hospitals and 3 different insurance companies to date. So we're really excited to be here. And going back to, I think, the earlier question about engagement, I think what is really, really important, especially for digital health companies, is, I think, as Genevieve mentioned, clinical validation. There was a recent study that looked at the top, I think it was 1,000 mental health apps out there. And the study found that 98% had no validation behind it. And so I think being able to prove that your system works is almost table stakes. And that narrows down the digital health field quite dramatically. We spent 3.5 years validating our solution with UHN. But the second thing that I think is most important, even more so than if it works, is do people use it? And engagement is a critical part of digital health, because if your solution works, but it's only used by 1 out of every 1,000 people that try it, you're not able to actually have that widespread access that you're suggesting. And so we as a company focus on engagement first, and then leverage that engagement to deliver the coping strategies in the healthcare that they need. So I'm going to stop talking there. A little bit longer of an overview. Sorry about that, Blair, but I'll hand it over back to you, Shanti.
Yeah, thanks there. That's a great overview. And as I think about chronic pain management, I think an excellent kind of segue to Ashanti and Pocket Naloxone, because really, I mentioned at the outset, we're experiencing an epidemic around COVID-19, but we're also being from Vancouver, but globally living through another epidemic, and that's the opioid epidemic, which has linkages through chronic pain, but also through vulnerable population. So Ashanti, why don't I pass it to you and have you give a bit of an overview on pocket naloxone and talk about some of the traction and validation, because again, evidence-based and proven efficacy is key. This not being a digital solution, but being a physical solution to the opioid epidemic. Oh, and you're on mute, Ashanti.
Okay, great.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, Blair, for having myself and Pocket Naloxone here. Ashanti Mathai, CEO of this startup. So first of all, let's start with what is naloxone. In an overdose situation, naloxone is the first thing that you want to grab before 911 arrives. It works like magic. It can revive somebody in seconds and prevent death or brain damage from lack of oxygen. But the current naloxone products that are available in Canada, in the US, are prescription and high priced. So Pocket Naloxone Corporation is working on bringing an affordable and accessible OTC naloxone product to market that will really democratize access for everyone, be available even on Amazon for rural communities and others who can't get to stores as easily as those in urban areas, but also really address the four quadrants, if you will, impact. It's really about first of all, we have a clinically superior product that improves, that works faster, that's better, which is critical for any emergency, life-threatening situation. A second, very key, is to also bring down the costs overall for the system. So it's the taxpayer money that funds the public health programs, or it's families and others who have to buy naloxone out of pocket, with insurance copays or not, and being able to systemically bring down the cost for the system, I think is also critical. And then the last two is really improving the experience for both the individual, the patient, the individual overdose, but also for the user, the caregiver as well. So in terms of traction, we've a development stage company. And glad you guys made an exception for us to bring this to market, as soon as possible. But the traction that we are seeing, Blair, is really incredible. So, there's so much of enthusiasm among clinicians and healthcare professionals who, really looking for, a affordable, accessible product for their patient populations. Family members, advocacy groups, support groups come out and said, oh, wow, you guys are doing this. You're going to bring down the cost of naloxone so much and make it accessible. That's amazing. And then the retail customers, the large chains who are going to be stocking this product on their shelves are just so excited and just waiting for, approval and launch. And then finally, we also have, just great traction with institutional customers like hospitals and clinics who also, feel that they need to have individuals leave with naloxone, but are unable to see that happen because of the current cost and access barriers.
That's great, Ashanti. Maybe I'll stick with you for a sec on this next question. And you talked about the demand for the product and the evolution of a product and really the multi-channel demand from institutions to family members, to physicians, to retailers, and then being able to really with your solution and a focus on an accessible price point to just get it into the hands of those that need it. Can you talk a bit about the scale of the issue? I mean, I mentioned that it's at an epidemic level, but can you contextualize that a bit for us, Canadian or US statistics, and how has that helped or hindered you from a raised perspective, and maybe talk about government interaction or support and or other institutional commitments or support on your fundraising?
Mhm. So the numbers, if you look at them, show that there have been more deaths from the opioid epidemic than from the pandemic, both in Canada and the US. Just recently in the US, we surpassed over 1 million overdose deaths. And this number is growing. Overdose deaths have increased 30% with the factors contributed from the pandemic, like isolation and other things. The pandemic will hopefully be over soon. We're all crossing our fingers. It'll be a matter of months, perhaps. But this year, unfortunately, the opioid epidemic is going to be with us for many more years. So that really, tells you the scale of this issue that we have to deal with, and really prevent overdose deaths that are continuing to increase.
Yeah, thanks, Ashanti. And that's a great point about the well, fingers crossed about a diminishing or a winding down of COVID-19, but no indication that the opioid epidemic is winding down or decelerating, as you noted, that during the COVID window, or these 2 years that we've been confronted with the COVID-19 global pandemic, that we indeed have seen a significant acceleration in opioid deaths. And it's a tragic matter and an amazing solution, and some fantastic work that you and the Pocket Naloxone team are doing. So kudos. Thayer, coming back to you, you touched on some partnerships and studies that you've done kind of early stages at managing life. So can you share or help other founders or investors here to think about any kind of key pivots that you've done or key partnerships that you've built out that have become fundamental enablers to capital raise or change the trajectory of your capital raise?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. I think our biggest opportunity was when we partnered with the University Health Network. And we were very fortunate to co-apply for a grant. It was a health technologies innovation grant. It was a provincial grant. And that allowed the very first collaboration to even take place, where we were able to validate our solution in a clinical environment. There was funding associated with researchers. There was publication costs that were covered. And so it really allowed UHN to do a formal study of our solution. And I think that was such a critical point for us as a company, because without it, I can't go to ultimately who our customers will be, which will be hopefully enterprise customers like insurers and health systems, to say that our solution works. The challenge, however, is that from start to when we had our first conversation to the publication of our study took 3.5 years. And so it is a very lengthy process to go through this rigor of clinical validation, which maybe some people who aren't exposed to healthcare aren't aware of these timelines, especially if they've traditionally invested in more technology type companies. It takes a while to prove that things work in healthcare. But I would say that when we published that study, that was a significant milestone for us, because now I can go with confidence to say this actually helps patients. And it's not just me saying it, here's external validation. I think the second milestone that we achieved is more from a business perspective. So it's one thing to say that we're able to help improve outcomes, but it's another thing to say that we can save money. So we actually partnered with RBC Insurance, and it took, again, 2.5 years to conduct our pilot with RBC, but they offered our solution to people on disability that had chronic pain. And to give people a sense, that's about 35% of the typical disability portfolio. And what they found is that people who used our solution got off disability faster and returned to work faster. And so that was published in a case study that highlighted the dollar savings to the disability carrier. And so I would say those are probably the two critical milestones for us as a company.
That's fantastic. There, maybe a build on that one. Chronic pain is, as you noted earlier, something that impacts so many Canadians. Like 1 in 5 have a chronic pain management issue with something that and given the long times that you've talked about on certification and validation, obviously difficult to quantify. So how do you approach measuring and reporting the social impact that managing life has when you're talking to impact investors and you're talking to the general investment community?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think Julian really summarized it well when he had suggested that he evaluates companies based on a quadruple aim. We very much quantify our impact along those same parameters. So the first thing in that quadruple aim is patient satisfaction. And so the number one thing that we look at is how many people download our app, how long do they use it for, what is the average rating on the Play Store, what are the reviews we get. So it's very much highlighting their experience. The second thing is clinical impact or outcomes, and that's the validation study I alluded to previously. And then the third thing is lower costs, which I had mentioned with RBC, and we're in a number of other studies, one with Alberta Health Services, where we're trying to quantify the impact on medical utilization. So unfortunately, there's not just one metric that we use to quantify our impact, because there are so many dimensions in healthcare. You have to look at the patient, the provider, the payer, and kind of use different metrics for each of those three stakeholders. But those are the three areas of how we quantify our impact.
That's great. Thanks for that. And I also love the multi-language support, again, being able to input patient care updates in 7 languages now. I think you guys support. So that's fantastic, and also enables greater inclusivity and better outcomes for a broader set of community members. So fantastic. Ashanti, I'll come to you, and I think we're coming up to close fairly soon. So maybe what I'll do is I'll ask you to both think about, and again, start with Ashanti, for investors or for from a portfolio perspective, what's the most valuable thing that an investor can bring to you as a founder and to you as an emerging and building corporation?
So I'll use the Pollinator Fund as an example. So outside of capital, you guys are a very active board observer with us, and you provide thoughtful feedback and input. You're always available as needed, and I think it's just the right balance of not being too overbearing, but always there and accessible. And I think that really there are a few different things that are really valuable to entrepreneurs, and it really comes down to the non-funding resources. Sometimes investors themselves are subject matter experts and can help enormously, but through our networks, you can make trusted introductions, referrals, and it's not just about for the product itself, so if it's a life science product, but for even things like back office needs in accounting and finance, IT support and so on. Getting that trusted referral is incredibly valuable. So I really do think that investors can and should try to support the entrepreneurs, get to know them, and work with them more outside of just writing the check, which of course is the thing that's the first thing that starts the relationship. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Ashanti. Dair, same question to you.
Yeah, I think Ashanti was pretty comprehensive in her answer there. The only thing I'd add is specific to impact investors that I found is it's always helpful to have an investor that puts impact at the same level as returns. And it always, especially for mission-driven founders, I'm speaking for Ashanti too, I assume, where that is really important to us. We want to make a difference. We want to influence lives, and we don't want to always just focus on revenues or financial returns. And having investors that also believe in that mission as well, it just really helps stay focused, allows us to stay focused on what's actually driving our company forward. So that's the only thing I would add to what she already mentioned.
That's great. Thank you both. Maybe I'll reach out to Kristen to see if there's been anything from the community in terms of questions that she's noted and wanted to flag. And if not, then I'm happy to just say a quick thank you and hand it back.
Yeah, absolutely. I see one here in the Q&A section. It could apply kind of for the investor panel. It also works well for these folks as well. So since we're trying to move towards more proactive medical treatment, how can we help foster faster healthcare adoption and more effective policy making kind of from an ecosystem approach? Is there anything as entrepreneurs that you think would be really effective for the broader ecosystem to help propel you forward? A bit of a loaded question.
I can jump in first. Yeah. Our biggest challenge in Canada has not been that people with pain don't find our solution useful. They do. It's not that providers and clinicians don't love using it and wouldn't want to use it. The challenge is neither of them have the finances to procure. Our system isn't built to improve people's pain. That's just not how healthcare is reimbursed currently in Canada. And so being able to, I guess, piggyback isn't maybe not the right word, but take advantage of some of the political momentum at the leadership level that emphasizes funding or improvements in certain areas like the opioid epidemic that has a lot of prioritization placed on it is one way that we can actually get traction within the public healthcare system. So I'd love to see that extend beyond just opioid use, which is kind of part of the same problem, but just the tail end of it, to have that conversation broaden a bit to earlier stage access to pain management.
Yeah, in our case, because the opioid epidemic is so front and center as the really the biggest public health challenge facing Canada and the US outside near-term pandemic, this issue really has gotten a lot of press, and through that, a lot of support. And I would just say, just having everyone from the U.S. Surgeon General to state governors and others saying that naloxone needs to be at hand, it needs to be in every first aid kit. It needs to be, every household, it should be like Tylenol and Band-Aids and so on. And so the FDA in the U.S. answered by actually creating an OTC naloxone pathway. And this is really great. So I think similarly for other healthcare problems as well, you'd want that to be that kind of overall realization coming together, and the different types of stakeholders, doing their part to, push forward, meaningful solutions.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think both of those answers were fantastic. And I think just highlighting a couple of things from that, Ashanti and Thayer both talked about the need to raise the visibility, or how visibility and transparency of issues can help one raise and address or remove stigma, which I think is so important, not just in the opioid crisis or in chronic pain management, but many other issues facing Canadians and global citizens today. And I think that visibility, awareness, and getting facts out there really matters, because it drives energy in citizens, and ultimately that advocacy or that energy drives politicians to act. So I think that's incredibly important, because of the stigma associated with the opioid crisis. It didn't get the public discussion because it was considered a very specific targeted issue in the downtown of East Side of Vancouver, say, when in fact the opioid epidemic runs across all demographics, and it is not strictly a low-income issue that is only experienced or taking on the homeless. And again, I think thinking about what Managing Life does and the validation and the clinical approval is talking about how you flip the debate and you use again facts to say that chronic pain management, so again, chronic pain may not have been something that was as visible, as easy to quantify or talk about, but you're able to talk about the outcomes and the cost to manage and how that changes, and looking at like systemic investments in either preventative measures or managing the outcomes, which can either be, good and avoided, or they can be bad and long-term and lead to so many other diseases and so many other negative outcomes, obviously, including death, but huge tax on the system. And so I think in combination, the visibility, the transparency, the clinical validation or proven outcomes, so critical in terms of helping being able to drive change at a systemic level, but also being able to drive interest in stakeholder groups and obviously in investor groups. So Ashanti and Dair, thank you so much for joining us today. I love the insights that you provided us with. Hopefully the group found the conversation valuable and that they want to learn more about the fantastic companies and founders that we've profiled here. And with that said, a final thanks again, and Kristen, back to you.
Thank you so much, Blair. So just with our panelists here as well, I see another question from Keith in the chat and one in the Q&A box. So feel free to take a look at those and respond to those in chat if you have a minute. Otherwise, thank you so much to all of our panelists that have spoken today, as well as to Keith and Blair. I will be going through kind of a program overview, and then we'll get into our networking stage. While we're at the thank yous, just thank you once again to the Telus Pollinator Fund and Blair for joining us today, for working with us on these series of events. We do have another event coming up on February 16th for mainly investors. Entrepreneurs are welcome to join too. And of course, to the rest of the Pollinator team who's been working behind the scenes, as well as the rest of the Spring team, such as Mar and Selena and Graham and Keith, who are kind of all behind the scenes today with their cameras off, for helping us to pull this together. So thank you all. And Selena, we can just kind of move them back up to the panel there. Perfect. So I'll just show quickly, kind of, Keith gave a great overview earlier of the challenge that we're going through here. I'll give you a little bit deeper dive into how you can get involved as an investor and an entrepreneur, what to expect from the program, as well as how you can apply. And so this is our Health Impact Investor Challenge that's going from March to May, presented alongside the Telus Pollinator Fund for Good. The idea of this challenge is that it's an 11-week program with both a cohort of 20 investors as well as a cohort of around 20 entrepreneurs as well. And so we bring in both sides of the equation, and they go through these 11 weekly sessions. These are 2-hour weekly sessions where they learn about topics to help them get ready for investment and for the investors to learn how to do an investment. So we get quite a few applications from the entrepreneur side and investors that are interested. We pool them together. These investors then pool a fund of around $100,000 between these 20 investors. And at the end of the 11 weeks, one company ends up winning the investment through going through that due diligence process and getting access to this $100,000 equity investment. While there's one direct investment, there's many, many winners throughout this process. So any company that applies is welcome to come out to our public pitch nights. There's one on March 16th and one on May 11th, where we'll be featuring the companies in the program. We'll also have a lot of our ecosystem in the room, so other investors, accelerators, incubators, people within the industry, and there's networking opportunities. So even if you don't make it into our final cohort, absolutely come out to those pitch nights. It's a great time. And I know Blair will be joining us again for one of those pitch nights as well. For the entrepreneurs that do make it into our top 20, throughout the process of the program, we go from our top 20 to our 10, and then our 5 companies that go through a really detailed due diligence process with our group of investors, at which point in the end, one company gets that investment. So we've run this Impact Investor Challenge multiple times. Typically, we kind of do these sector agnostic, regionally, We have one going on right now that's focused on climate, but this challenge specifically in partnership with the Telus Pollinator Fund is for healthcare companies. And I'm sure many of you that are here today are either interested in health or have a healthcare company yourselves. Overall, looking back at our impact investor challenges, we've trained over 100 impact investors. We've featured over 100 different companies that are impact early stage businesses. 25 of those companies have been finalists that have gone through a deep due diligence process and been prepped on how to become investment ready. And we've catalyzed over $11 million in impact investments, including making over $400,000 in direct impact investments through pooling the funds of investors through this program. Some example topics of our weekly sessions. This is what you can expect to learn a lot about through the program. Of course, we have more standard sessions on investment evaluation, due diligence, negotiation, but we'll also be diving really deep into the lens of a mix of capital and healthcare. So depending on what domain of healthcare you're in, digital health, medical device, pharma, mental health, there's different pathways to financing and roadmaps. There's also a lot of different sources of capital that you can pursue. And so we'd like to help you unpack that as both an entrepreneur and an investor of how you can consider these opportunities, as well as when you're looking at the roadmap of traction of health companies. There's different expectations to look at in terms of, when they should have revenue, what are indicators of traction, is it university partnerships, is it grant funding, and helping to unpack that for both investors and entrepreneurs. The investment overview. So as I said, in May, there'll be around $100,000 that is an equity investment given to one company that wins. The investment is made through a special purpose vehicle that Spring creates and funds. And what's important here is that it's extremely entrepreneur friendly, because instead of 25 angel investors appearing on your cap table, you have one line within your cap table that encompasses all of these pooled funds. And so if you're an entrepreneur in the room looking to apply, and you've either gone through an investment process or you have angels or individuals that are looking to invest, recommend that you apply to this program and also refer some of your angel investors into the program. So if you have a family or friend or an angel investor that's looking to invest in your company, this is a great way for them to join a group, have kind of all of those legal aspects of setting up that investment all pulled together here through Spring. And of course, they get the opportunity to go through the program and learn a ton as well. So we've had great results of entrepreneurs bringing in family, friends, or angel investors in the past. Who is this program for? So as Keith mentioned, towards the end of this week is our deadline for entrepreneurs to apply. We do have another month or so for investors to apply. So for any entrepreneurs in the room, we're looking for pre-seed to seed stage, of course, healthcare companies. You have to have some sort of impact lens. So you may not have figured out how you're going to measure and evaluate your impact, but you do need to be prioritizing your impact and impact first as a business. If you are unsure whether you kind of fit within this as a company, please check out our landing page on this event and feel free to get in touch with me as well. Happy to have a further conversation. For our investors, this program is designed to serve investors and individuals looking to make a difference through the power of capital. It's not exclusive at all to seasoned investors. And so, in fact, the different types of people that we've worked with as investors through this program, you can be an accredited or a non-accredited investor. You might be a seasoned investor curious to learn more about impact investing or healthcare. You could be an experienced entrepreneur who maybe has built a couple of businesses and exited a business, and now you're interested in learning about the investment side of the equation. You could be corporate or early in your career, purpose-driven, looking to get into kind of investing in your career. Or you could be a medical or healthcare professional looking to stay up to date about innovation within healthcare and learn about investing. So these are a couple samples of who you might be. Of course, your story is unique as well, and we'd love to hear from you if you're interested in becoming an investor. Both the entrepreneur and investor applications are pretty quick and easy to go through, so you can take a look at the website, go through those right now. As I said, entrepreneur application deadline is this Friday. We do have that February 16th health investment workshop coming up, which will be our next event. And then by February 28th, we will have our investor application deadline. Keep in mind, if you are an investor interested, please reach out. We have program packs for both entrepreneurs and investors on our website. Our investor cohort often fills before February 28th. So once we fill those spots, that cohort will be filled. So don't wait until February 28th to reach out. Speak to me today, and we'll make sure that you kind of find a place within the cohort. You can apply today on our website as well. If you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to me. My email is here, kristen@spring.is. And we also have Graham in the audience today, who's our program director. And his email is graham@spring.is. And some of you may have been in contact with him about the program. So this is our application roadmap looking forward, and then the program will kick off in early March. Feel free to get in touch with Telus Pollinator through their different social channels, as well as their websites. And then here's ours at Spring as well. So that being said, we will be heading to our final portion of today's event, which is our networking session. How this is going to work is we're all going to, in a little bit, go into the lobby of the Zoom event here. So you'll exit this main webinar and you'll join our meeting where we have networking. Once we're all over in there, we'll go into different breakout rooms and get to chat and learn more about everybody that's here today. So that being said, thank you once again to everybody, and we'll see you all over there in the networking portion. Looking forward to get to know you.